President.
Republican leader.
The attacks of October 7th brought the world face to face with the savage terrorists who tried to destroy the Jewish state for decades. They forced us all to take a sober look at what our ally, Israel, has to defend against every single day. In the months since, I've insisted repeatedly that America should provide Israel the time, the space, and the support it needs to defeat Iran-backed terrorists and restore its security. And I've made it clear that the consensus of Israel's National Unity War Cabinet that lasting security can only come after Hamas is defeated ought to be our position here in America as well. Early on, there was reason to believe that President Biden shared this view. I was encouraged by his initial willingness to move quickly to transfer needed munitions to Israel, by his request for an emergency national security supplemental, including urgent security assistance to Israel, and by what he called his administration's ironclad commitment to Israel's security. Unfortunately, we've seen since then that iron bend under the heat of domestic political pressure from his party's anti-Israel base and the campus communists who decided to wrap themselves in the flags of Hamas and Hezbollah. We've seen his administration cave in to growing demands to condition and limit assistance to our democratic ally. We've seen public attempts to micromanage Israel's self-defense, to constrain Israel's freedom of action. And a few days ago, we saw reports that the president was delaying weapons shipments to Israel, creating daylight between America and a close ally. As it turns out, these reports were true, and the decision to pause these shipments was withheld from Congress. We still don't know the key facts. I speak with some experience in the difficulties of standing up to extreme elements in one's own political party. But the president's apparent inability to keep the most radical voices on his left flank out of the Situation Room isn't just a shameful abdication of leadership, it's actually dangerous. Failing to pass the Emergency National Security Supplemental would have been devastating to Ukraine's defense and America's credibility. For the administration to withhold assistance from Israel is devastating in its own right. At home, it will only whet the appetite of the anti-Israel left, and abroad it will embolden Iran and its terrorist proxies. There's no secret shortcut to restoring peace and security. A return to the status quo ante doesn't solve the challenge at hand. The status quo before October 7th was what allowed Iran the latitude to export terror across the Middle East and allowed Hamas to exploit a ceasefire to launch the attacks. For those who care about the humanitarian situation in Gaza, and I would count myself among those who do, the most enduring way to help the Palestinian people is to help Israel defeat Hamas. A return to the status quo ante will only perpetuate the conditions that have long plagued the people of Gaza and threatened the people of Israel. In the last week, their terrorist oppressors have struck the main humanitarian entrance to Gaza twice with mortars. It's time for the president to stop letting domestic political demands of the far left determine his foreign policy. And it's time to stop doubting the will of Israel's unity government and their overwhelming view of the Israeli people. A future of peace for Israelis and Palestinians is one in which Iran-backed terrorists play no part.